Welcome back into the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap, presented by Full Press Coverage. I am back from my week sabbatical from Los Angeles. Sap, I needed to take a week to decompress from the Celtics losing in the NBA Finals. I needed to go, out of communication from the rest of the world, just go completely blind and numb to basketball. And what I was expecting to do, Sap, was come back today and talk about the NBA draft. Who are the winners? Who are the losers? But Kyrie Irving, that, constant thorn in my side, Sap, he found a way to, again, make sure this show that we do is going to be all about him. And so Kyrie Irving hijacked the entire process of us trying to, do a show talking about recapping the draft, previewing free agency, because yesterday was absolutely one of the craziest Kyrie Irving days in what has been a, career of crazy days, Sap. He was supposed to maybe go to the Lakers. Now he's back with the Nets. There were a million different scenarios. We'll talk about all of them. But, Sap, what are your feelings on Kyrie Irving 24 hours after what was a wild day in NBA news?
Well, I love watching the player. That's obvious. I think he's one of the most skilled guys I've ever seen. I think he's fascinating off the court because he gives us a ton of content. I mean, I like athletes that are interesting, even though if they're batshit crazy, I find them interesting. And he certainly is. Absolutely. There's no question about that with Kyrie Irving. And I was kind of hoping he was going to work his way to join you in LA, maybe before you left LA a day ago. Maybe you would have seen Kyrie at the airport flying in to become an LA Laker. Instead, he's going to stay with the Nets for one more year, unless they somehow trade him, which anything's possible with Kyrie Irving. And then, of course, he opted in for $36.5 million, which is a smart business decision. The Nets had basically told him, go ahead and see if you can make a deal with some other team, and nothing worked out. The only way he could have not gone in with the Nets and accepted that player option, it would have been to sign a $6.5 million mid-level exception with the Lakers, which he wasn't going to do that. I know he doesn't think of himself as like everyone else and motivated by money, but he is like everyone else motivated by money. So he decided to take the safe bet, one more year with Brooklyn, unless they move on from him, and they'll run it back with Kevin Durant, Ben Simmons, and see what they can do if all three of those guys are healthy and invested. But I'm really pissed at Kyrie, Jet, because I was about 80% through a column saying that he was going to end up with the Lakers and how great it would be to, after 5 years being away from LeBron James, that they could reunite and maybe win another title. And after I was, like I say, 80% done, the news came out. So I just hit delete on that potential column.
Sap, shame on you for believing that anything with Kyrie is set in stone until it actually happens. And I say that as somebody that firmly believed he was going to re-sign with the Celtics. So in my mind, we were at the Herald at the time. I had my whole radio show planned out for us when Kyrie re-signed, waving it in your face and saying, nana, nana, boo-boo, Sap, you idiot. You were so wrong. This guy is a very loyal person. So he's fooled a lot of people, Sap. So, you're in the long list of people that Kyrie Irving has fooled and you're upset with the guy. The one guy who seems to just find no wrong in what Kyrie Irving does besides himself is Kevin Durant. Everything you've read throughout this whole process, Kevin Durant's seems like he has Kyrie's back 100%, which to me, Sap, is shocking because when Durant signed in Brooklyn as part of a package deal with Kyrie, we knew they were close, but the intention was he's going to win multiple championships with that team. And the amount of damage that Kyrie has done to that goal, to that end, directly just Kyrie, it's like Kevin Durant can't see it. It's almost like he's hypnotized. I think we've used that wording before, Sap. So there's so many layers to this Kyrie thing, but how do you look at the Durant part of it?
Well, Durant, when asked about this a week ago, said he's going to stay out of it, which I think is a pretty good idea. I mean, you don't want players on the same team starting to put out their opinions about what another player should do contractually. I think like Baker Mayfield got involved with this with the Cleveland Browns a year or two ago, and that kind of has a way of, tearing apart the locker room, especially in football.
Yeah, you don't want to mix business and friendship, I guess, is the idea, right?
No, you want every player to get what they can. There is that brotherhood. And again, Kyrie being a vice president in the Players Association, is he going to go sign with the Lakers for $6.5 million? The Players Association would say, Kyrie, you're still one of the best players in the league. What the hell are you doing? Opt in, get the 36 plus million, play another year in Brooklyn, and then you can be a free agent at the end of next year. But it doesn't seem like there's a lot of suitors for Kyrie. If he had gone full free agency, the teams that had the money to potentially sign him aren't going to sign Kyrie Irving. They're all teams that are kind of rebuilding, and they're trying to build through the draft. He's a guy that you go after if you think he can be the missing piece, which I think the Lakers would look at him and say, reunite him with LeBron and Anthony Davis. You got those three guys. If they're healthy and engaged, there's a championship team. So I think that that's something that you could have looked at. But with Kyrie, you just never know. And then, of course, he has to tweet out that, whatever, average people make the world go round, but those that are willing to take chances are what makes the world grow. And I'm kind of paraphrasing what he said. Well, if he really wanted to be different, he could have just gone to the Lakers and tried to win a championship in LA with LeBron. He did what most people would do, take the best offer that was out there.
Yeah, I mean, for all the, like you said, Sap, for all the stuff that he tries to make himself seem like, he's this unique thinker, he's this unique guy, at the end of the day, he wasn't willing to take a $30 million haircut. That's not a reasonable thing. So you got the crazy part of Kyrie and you got the sane part of Kyrie, and he wants to, do you kind of feel like part of it is he wants people to think he's crazy?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I think he's at some points probably trolling everybody, right? Look, is there anyone in the league that's discussed as much as Kyrie, who still hasn't accomplished everything that we think he's accomplished? Yes, he hit a huge shot in the 2016 finals. He's a marvelous player, but he's a guy who's missed a third of his games in his career. I mean, that's pretty significant. Played 29 games last year because he wrote out off the home games because he wasn't going to get vaccinated. So he gave up $17 million. Again, I think people are just enamored with the talent. I know I am. I mean, when you watch the guy play, you look at him and go, this guy is as skilled as any player we've ever seen. I know that people were breaking down Steph Curry, Kyrie Irving. Obviously, Steph Curry's the greater player because of all those accomplishments. But when you look at Kyrie Irving's game, the handle, the ability to finish at the basket, the mid-range game, he is a really good three-point shooter. He's a great free throw shooter. I mean, the game is there. And I think that his teammates are enamored with that, including someone like Kevin Durant or anyone else that has ever played with him. They look at him and go, man, this guy is so talented. It's almost like in other businesses, like comedians or actors or great film directors. They look at other comedians and actors and film directors and say, that guy's the most talented or that woman is the most talented. Something different than we would think, right? It's a completely different approach to it than, say, we have. And I think that's where Kyrie Irving is right now, who's someone that he steps on the basketball court. You see the skill set and you're just blown away by it. Now, it hasn't translated all the way into being an all-time great. It didn't even make the all-NBA team, the 75th anniversary team. So obviously, that's something that you could look at and say, maybe he deserves that. I know you wanted to discuss, is he a Hall of Famer as of today? I think he is, but we can get into that a little bit later. But people are just enamored with his talent, and for good reason. I mean, he's one of the most skilled guys I've ever seen on a basketball court. No doubt about that. But a lot of other stuff has kind of deterred him from becoming as great a player as he should have been.
Yeah, and certainly it's not just, the games he's missed, but, when he's been healthy, Sap, he's been aloof, not fully committed. We could talk about his last season with the Celtics where it was healthy but he wasn't fully there, and the Celtics bowed out, to the Bucks, in a series that he was awful, not because he was not healthy, but because he just didn't give two shits. And I think, you saw a little bit of that in the first round series this year with the Nets when they lost to the Celtics and got swept, and that he had a marvelous game one, and then he didn't really seem, he kind of checked out after that. I certainly think he's a bad teammate. And again, I've acknowledged 200 times in the show, I can't stand the guy. So you're not going to get an unbiased opinion from me. I'm just putting that out there. But I mean, he's absolutely destroyed two teams, and he's working his way through the third. And so, the hesitancy for teams to do a sign and trade for him, where I'm assuming the Nets wanted significant assets. I understand it, like, of course, Sap, like you said, the talent is there. Everybody acknowledges that too, but the track record is also there of him torpedoing these teams. And so if you're a Miami Heat or, a team that is a contender like that, and you don't want to give up assets, I get it, because he seems like he's toxic. For the Lakers, they're not there yet. We know they didn't even make the playoffs, so it's worth the risk for them. But for a team like we were hearing the Clippers or Miami or Dallas, like teams that have had, success this past season, I don't know that they view Kyrie as an upgrade at this point.
And could it only be LeBron James who's the only player that could maybe handle Kyrie Irving? And even he had difficulty with Kyrie Irving. They played 3 years together. Year one, they made it to the finals, and then Kyrie had the knee injury in game one of the finals, and Golden State won that series in 6 games. Year two, they won the title. By year three, Kyrie Irving wasn't even speaking to his teammates, and that's when, at the end of the season, said, well, I'm going to go get knee surgery unless you trade me. I'm going to essentially, mail in half the season unless you trade me. So they were forced to trade him. So he lasted 2.5 years with LeBron James, and I think LeBron's a great leader, as is Steph Curry. And maybe those are the only two guys in the league that could kind of control him. I don't look at Durant as a leader. I think of him more as a follower. I think he's a phenomenal basketball player. We both agree on that. But he had most success in Golden State because Steph Curry's the leader of that team, or you've got a big personality and Draymond Green, and you've built a really good organization. In Brooklyn, there are no leaders. And then you hire a coach who's never coached before in Steve Nash. So it's kind of a rudderless ship. And then you bring in Ben Simmons, who didn't even play last year. So it is quite a toxic situation, although if it all fits together, it's a marvelously talented team as well. But yeah, I don't know if there were any suitors out there for Kyrie. And if there were, the Nets were going to want to get back some assets, and teams weren't willing to do that because he's a wild card, right? I mean, You just don't know with him. He could retire after next year, and you would have given up, 3 firsts and 2 established players to get 1 year of Kyrie Irving, who, by the way, midway through the season may have checked out. He's done that on numerous occasions. Again, he's missed a third of his games in the NBA. I mean, I know there's load management in the NBA, but a third of the games that he was scheduled to play, he's missed. That's a major problem.
Sap, a significant amount of those games are games that he punted on and chose, not because he was hurt. The vaccine thing, all those misses, those DNPs were his choice. And the season prior, after the Capitol insurrection, he took 3 weeks off or whatever the hell he did. So that was his choice too. So he's a total flake. So on top of all the other stuff, and you asked me, Sap, is LeBron the only player that could, kind of rein him in and handle him? I don't even think that's the case. I think that if the way the Lakers were looking at it, if I was a Laker fan, the way I would look at it is like, it's almost too much talent to fail. Like, okay, LeBron might not be able to rein him in, but LeBron plus Kyrie plus Anthony Davis, it's like Kyrie can be as crazy as he wants. Like, that's just too much talent for the team to suck. I would think. And, for all the crazy crap that Kyrie has done, not this year, but the year prior, if that Nets team was healthy, they probably won the championship. So, the talent still is going to trump everything on the court, but you got to have a lot of talent for it to work. Like, you can't put Kyrie on a team that's got one other semi-star player like Miami with Jimmy Butler. Like, it's just that's not going to work. You need to have an abundance of talent, in my mind, for the benefits of Kyrie to outweigh the negatives.
Yeah, because he may not show up for 2 or 3 weeks, so you still have to play without him, and hopefully you can kind of keep the ship afloat. Then by the time you get to the postseason, is he still interested? Is he worn down? I mean, you talked about the playoff series against the Celtics. He was marvelous in game 1. He had 39 points. He was the best player on the floor. Then he kind of mailed it in games 2, 3, and 4, and the Nets got swept by the Celtics. So there's so many question marks with him. I know there were rumors of him going to Miami because he's striking up a relationship with Jimmy Butler, which I think would be a really odd mix, because Butler's a guy who's not as talented as Kyrie Irving, but has kind of gotten the most out of his talent throughout his career. He's a kind of a blood and guts effort guy. And I would think that would last probably 2 months before Jimmy Butler would want to choke him at some point, right? I mean, you can see that. Or if Kyle Lowry's still on the team, another guy who's kind of overperformed his ability throughout his career. And we know how the Heat are constructed with Pat Riley and Eric Spoelstra. They have a really good culture there. Are they going to put up with Kyrie Irving? I doubt it. So again, the places were limited. I thought he was going to go to the Lakers, but they couldn't make it happen. So he's back to Brooklyn. And again, unless they decide to move on from him, who the hell knows what's going to happen next with Kyrie Irving? We don't know.
Here's why, Sap, the Lakers couldn't make it happen, because the trade that they had for Russell Westbrook was the trade that I guess they should have had for Kyrie Irving. All the assets they gave up to get Westbrook probably would have worked to secure Kyrie Irving. Don't you think, Sap?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I threw out there late last year that a perfect trade, which would have been the most fascinating trading league history, would have been Ben Simmons and Kyrie Irving from Brooklyn to LA for Anthony Davis and Russell Westbrook. I mean, obviously, talk about the storylines with that one. Westbrook going back to play with Durant, which I don't know if that would work, because Durant and Westbrook obviously had a falling out back, 5-6 years ago when Durant left Oklahoma City for Golden State. But yeah, you could have given up those assets, the draft picks, KCP, Kyle Kuzma, all that, which they gave up to get Russell Westbrook, and that would have been enough to get Kyrie Irving, especially a guy going into the final year of his contract if he had just opted into that, and then you work on a new deal. But yeah, they used all those assets to get Russell Westbrook, who, by the way, just re-upped for one more year with the Lakers. What the hell are they going to do with him? I mean, they're stuck with Westbrook for another year, and even an option of swapping him for John Wall is out the door now, because John Wall got bought out by Houston and is going to sign with the Clippers. So even that option's not there.
Right. So Westbrook, opts in for the, $47 million. That makes him the second highest paid player in the league this season. Only Steph Curry is getting paid more than him. So, congratulations to Russell Westbrook's agent. Very good job. Westbrook was obviously always going to opt in. Despite all the vitriol he got from Lakers fans, that's where he wants to play. He's from there. He wants to play for the Lakers. So he was going to do that from a location standpoint too. He wasn't going to turn. He wouldn't get half that on the open market. So no. That was obvious that he was going to do that. And in terms of a trade for Kyrie that would have worked. The fact of the matter is that Westbrook is what the Lakers are offering, and he's a net negative asset. So the Nets weren't going to take that on because it hurts their team. They're not going to take on assets that are actively, bad. And that Westbrook contract, despite it just being for a year, Sap, is the worst contract in the league. I mean, it's terrible.
Yeah, you really can't do anything with it, right? Except he opts in. You hope that the chemistry is better next year and that LeBron and Anthony Davis are healthier. And then maybe you can kind of work with Westbrook. I don't think it's going to work because Westbrook is a very stubborn player. In some ways, similar to Kyrie Irving in that he's got that stubbornness, but in other ways, very different than Kyrie Irving. At least Westbrook shows up to play. It looks to me like he does give a crap about what goes on the court, especially at the offensive end. He kind of takes it easy on the defensive end. And look, Kyrie Irving's not exactly Chris Paul on the defensive end as far as being an elite defender. But at least Westbrook, you can count on, is going to show up. He's not going to take 3 weeks off because something happened in Southern California that pissed him off, or something happened in Washington, D.C. that pissed him off. I mean, you can kind of count on Russell Westbrook, although at times you wish he would take some time off because he was a net negative on the court last year. He was a disaster.
Yeah. So, we have these two opt-ins with, different ramifications. I think what you alluded to earlier, Sap, at the very top of the show is right, in that if we are just to assume this Kyrie situation is over because he opted in, I think that history has proven that we would be crazy for assuming that. I think that there's an equally high likelihood that they try to trade him at some point, maybe this summer after free agency, maybe at the trade deadline. But to think that he's just going to be the happy camper and everything's going to be kumbaya in Nets land, I think history has shown that that's not going to be the case with Kyrie.
No, my only question is, when does he have Kanye West and Donda Sports begin their relationship as his agent?
Jaylen Brown is represented by them, Sap. So, it's a very quality agency.
And Aaron Donald of the Rams.
They have two good clients.
They have two great clients. I mean, Aaron Donald, some people think is the best player in football.
Do you know who Kyrie's agent is, Sap?
Is it his dad?
It's his stepmother.
Oh, okay. Well, he's kind of like Lamar Jackson's mom is his agent, which I think makes no sense. And I'm not trying to, break up families, But the idea of an agent is to go in with the team and hammer out a new deal. There's going to be some slings and arrows when that happens. You know, the team's going to try to talk you down in terms of price. So they're going to criticize the player and say, well, you know, if you're in football, Lamar Jackson's great, but he's not Aaron Rodgers. He's not Tom Brady. He's not Patrick Mahomes. He's not Josh Allen. So he should make less than those guys. I shouldn't use Brady in this because his contract is always kind of unto itself a different one. But you get my point. Now, if you've got their parent in there arguing about the contract, I don't think that's a good idea at all.
No, you can't be emotional about it, right? It's purely dollars and cents. You got to you got to take emotions out of the bargaining equation.
Well, again, maybe Kyrie decides to join Donda Sports, who the CEO of Donda Sports is none other than Antonio Brown.
Is that true?
That's true. Yes. He's the CEO of Donda Sports. Yes. So what could possibly go wrong with that organization?
That really makes me question Jaylen Brown, who I think is a very intelligent person. Okay. I didn't know that.
Well, hooking up with Kanye West is not a bad move. I mean, the guy is worth what, $7-8 billion. He's a master marketer. I don't know what Antonio Brown's going to do in that situation if that's the truth, that he is the CEO of Donda Sports. But at least that's what Antonio Brown is saying, that he's the CEO of Donda Sports. I don't know. Maybe, Antonio Brown is off his meds.
I'm hoping that it's, Kanye's just lent his name to the thing and is going to collect, the residuals and not actually, in the boardroom advocating for contracts. Because otherwise, between him and Antonio Brown, they're you got two legitimately insane people. I'm trying to argue on your behalf. So
how would this scenario be?
Perfect.
How would this scenario be where you've got Kanye West and Antonio Brown coming in to negotiate with Brad Stevens and Wick Grossbeck about a Jaylen Brown's extension? Just picture Brad Stevens, who reminds me of a pilot. He's kind of a square. He eats his vegetables, probably has his clothes in alphabetical order in his closet, very orderly, kind of dull guy. Sitting down with Kanye West and Antonio Brown to negotiate Jaylen Brown's next contract. That would be priceless. They'd have to put that out on reality TV.
Antonio Brown hucking his briefcase if things don't go as well.
Right. Yeah.
Jeez. Okay.
And maybe by then, Kyrie Irving is part of their leadership team. Maybe he's, vice president of Donda Sports. Who knows?
It seems like it would be a perfect fit for him. It's just, just a crazy organization for crazy people. Okay. Well, I feel a little differently about Jaylen Brown over the last 45 seconds. Thank you, Sal. So yeah, I don't think this Kyrie situation is over by a long shot. We know that now he is a lame duck, contract status guy because he's a free agent at the end of the year. We know what that has done in the past to what it did to the Celtics, where it was awful the last year he was here. So this next season, I can't see being a successful year, Sap. But the guy is a complete wild card. Trying to predict what he does or how things happen around him is it's a futile effort. The funniest thing I read, Sap, about all of this, though, before we move on, is that Kevin Durant, I read, was upset with the Nets front office because they didn't take the time to get to know Kyrie Irving, which I think is just laughable. Like Kyrie Irving would be willing to sit down and explain his point of view to these people. And even if he did, it would make any sort of logical sense.
He wasn't at the home games.
Right.
So that cuts out half of the opportunities to get to know the guy.
I read that. I was like,
he didn't show
what
up for
is he
work
talking
for 3
about?
weeks. I mean, in January of 2021, he didn't show up for 3 weeks, and then he never came to the home games last year. How the hell can you get to know the guy when he's not there? I mean, Durant's as much a nut as him because we think that Durant is a really bright guy. To come up with that, oh my Lord!
I swear, Sap, he's like David Koresh, Kyrie Irving. He is like a cult leader. He's all these people hypnotized. It's wild. But he's not the only player in the NBA. And so there are other things to talk about. We talked a little bit about the Russell Westbrook thing, picking up his option. So, Sap, let me ask you quickly before we talk about another team and another point guard, as I want to talk about John Wall in a second. Russell Westbrook back on the Lakers. What does this Lakers offseason look like? Just really quickly. And can next season possibly be better with Westbrook, LeBron, and Anthony Davis?
No. unless they can add some pieces here in free agency. No, I mean, LeBron's going to be a year older. Anthony Davis is going to be another year injured. Russell Westbrook's going to be a year worse. I mean, I don't think Russell Westbrook's going to look in the mirror this morning and say, you know what, I've got to change the way I play for the betterment of the team.
You don't think Darvin Ham's the cure-all to everything, Seth?
He might help. I mean, because he does have a commanding presence. And again, if you could sell the defensive end, you still got LeBron who could play defense, and you got Anthony Davis. I mean, the key to this is Anthony Davis. If Anthony Davis plays 65, 70 games and plays at a very high level, then all of a sudden I think the Lakers can be a factor, because I think LeBron would get engaged, and now you've got two, top 10 players on your roster. But Russell Westbrook is very difficult to try to fit in there. I'm talking about a square peg in a round hole. It just doesn't work. And what else can you do? I mean, you didn't have anything to go on in the draft. You have no room to really sign free agents. You're going to have to make some moves. You have this deep roster of crap. You bring back some of these guys that didn't even play last year. I don't know what the hell they're going to do. They're a mess right now. But the possibility exists because you have LeBron and Anthony Davis. Again, if healthy and engaged, they can be a factor. But I'm not optimistic.
I think it just goes to show, Saf, that when you have these mega deals where you trade a bunch of assets for, a star player like what Westbrook, like the Celtics did years ago with Garnett, and, with the Harden trade, you need to make sure you're banking on the right guy, because if it blows up in your face, it sets you back years and years and years. Like this Westbrook trade has absolutely the window that should have been for LeBron and Anthony Davis. It has made this thing, it's like slam the window shut, because they backed the wrong horse. Because everything they had left in terms of assets, they gave up for a guy who just does not fit for the team, fit well with the team. And so if you're going to trade for a star player, and oftentimes that works out, the team that gets the star player wins the deal, but you need to be damn sure it's the right star player, because teams do give up a considerable amount of players and draft capital. And for the Lakers, not making the playoffs this year, Sep, they had to give up a lottery pick. And so that was from a prior Anthony Davis trade. And I'm not saying that trade was bad, because they obviously won a title out of it, but they don't have a lot of picks for a while. You got to be sure, if you're going to give up a ton, that you're getting a player that is going to be the right fit. You need to make sure you're doing your due diligence and everything like that. And the Lakers just absolutely gutted their organization to bring in Russell Westbrook.
They kind of panicked last offseason, right? Because they won the title. And then the next year, midway through the season, they looked like the best team in basketball. And I think they would have repeated if LeBron doesn't get hurt midway through the season with that, pretty gruesome ankle injury, or if Anthony Davis doesn't get hurt several times, including getting hurt against Phoenix in round one. Let's not forget, in round one, the Lakers were up 2-1, up 10 points late in the second quarter. Anthony Davis gets hurt. Phoenix come back, wins that game, wins the next 2 games, and moves on to the finals. If Anthony Davis doesn't get hurt against Phoenix, I think the Lakers win that series and probably make it back to the finals, where I think they could beat Giannis and the Bucks, because I think they would match up pretty well against Milwaukee, because they had ample rim protection there with Anthony Davis and some of their other bigs, right? And then you got LeBron with all that experience. And then after that season, instead of saying, well, let's just fine tune, let's tweak it, they went out and blew the whole thing up and got rid of KCP, who was a nice piece on that championship team, and Kyle Kuzma, who was a nice piece on that championship team, and then all these draft picks to get Russell Westbrook, who just never fit in. They kind of panicked. And that
and then they can't afford Caruso, who has to leave because they can't pay him.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, give me KCP, Kuzma, and Caruso over Russell Westbrook. It obviously lends you to a deeper team. And also you keep those draft picks that, maybe you get lucky, and even if it's a late first-round pick, you add a quality piece. Look, the Celtics had 2 late first-round picks. Robert Williams is a home run. I mean, they got him late in the first round. And even Peyton Pritchard's a nice pick late in the first round. You can find players down in that part of the draft. Doesn't mean they're not valuable.
Well, it's not just that, Seth, that you could find players that are useful too, but the Lakers are old and they could have used an injection of youth. And those are your best, little, trade assets and sweeteners to get things, So if they did want to tweak or upgrade in a little place, you need to use draft picks to do that. And nobody wants to the Lakers are dangling like 20 picks in 2027, 2029. Like people want to keep their jobs in the NBA. They're not trying to trade for picks that, they would have since been on 3 other jobs at that point until they convey. It doesn't make a GM look really good to say, well, if you just wait until, 2029 when this Lakers picks convey, I'm telling you, I made the right deal. So, those don't have any value. You got to trade something that has inherent value. And so the Lakers have nothing to offer. All they have to offer right now is the appeal of playing basketball in Los Angeles for the Lakers. And I don't know that holds the same thing as it used to. I still think it does hold some sway, but the way the team is right now, I think you're right to think, Sap, I don't see how it's going to work. But the X factor you aptly said is Anthony Davis. If you can get, full potential Anthony Davis, they're a dangerous team, but he's given you no reason to think he can play that much.
No, I mean, the last 2 years and really his whole career, he's been a guy who doesn't play more than 72% of his games. So he's a little more durable than Kyrie Irving. And he's a big guy, so you can kind of understand why there's going to be some injury concerns there. And then I worry about his conditioning and his commitment and all of those things. And when you start questioning a player's commitment, that's where it really is difficult to see that getting his most potential, right? I mean, certain guys are all in. They're going to be the best they can be. When you start to question someone's love for the game, that's when there's a problem. And I think you get that with Kyrie Irving. Like, is basketball that important to him? I think the idea of being a basketball superstar is important because it allows him to get involved in other things that he likes, but, is actually playing of the game, is that important to Kyrie Irving or Anthony Davis or another superstar who doesn't seem to be totally invested?
It's funny, Sep, because sometimes it's infectious, right? Like LeBron obviously has been all in, being the best he can be for 20 plus years. Russell Westbrook, despite his flaws, I think is that type of player too. And then, Anthony Davis doesn't seem to, he's not Ben Simmons level of apathy, but
no,
it's, he certainly, in terms of how talented he is, he hasn't maximized that. He should be perennially a top 5 MVP candidate every single year he plays.
Yeah, I mean, he's a nightmare matchup, right? You're talking 6'10 and a half, 6'11 with guard skills, a great rim protector. I mean, there's a guy who's more talented than Giannis. I mean, pure skill set is better than Giannis, but
yeah,
because he can shoot, right? I mean, he can shoot threes. He's a really good free throw shooter. He could do more than Giannis, but Giannis is the better player because he's totally committed to being as great as he can be.
Yeah, I think Anthony Davis has the same sort of skill set as Kevin Garnett, and talk about somebody who's committed to basketball. Kevin Garnett, right. I mean, that's the type of career Anthony Davis could have had. Maybe even win more titles because, he's playing with LeBron, and Kevin Garnett took so long for him to play with other quality players. But, he's never in phenomenal shape. He's always injured. He seems somewhat apathetic when he's on the court sometimes. Like, you'll look at the box score and be like, why did Anthony Davis play 40 minutes and take 8 shots?
Right.
So, there's questions about him too, but I think you're right. That's the X factor for the Lakers. If things are going to change for the better for them, it starts with him. Certainly. Sap, the other team in LA, is the first team to really make a big offseason move, as free agency doesn't start in earnest until Thursday, right?
Thursday, 6 p.m.
But we already have an announcement of somebody who's going to sign. John Wall got bought out by the Rockets, gave back $6 million to get bought out from that awful situation in Houston, where he didn't play last year at all, just sat out healthy. And he's going to sign with the Clippers. So, Sap, what does this bring to the Clippers? John Wall is a guy who's been hurt a lot in his career, is seemingly healthy now, similar to Westbrook in a lot of ways, not a great shooter, very athletic, probably doesn't have that same level of athleticism. Last time we saw him in an NBA game, he had a pretty solid season. He's not, the all-star John Wall, but does he add something to this Clippers team, Sap?
I think the last time we saw him was the Obama administration, right?
Yeah,
I mean, it seems like it was that long ago. I think he could fit in with that team because you have Paul George and Kawhi Leonard, if healthy. We're talking about 2 elite wings who can get you 50 points per game, outstanding defense. So maybe he can be a facilitator. He seems maybe more likely to accept that role than, say, Russell Westbrook would. What we've seen with the Lakers in the past season, where he just don't want to be Russell Westbrook. I think it's worth a shot, right? I mean, and Ty Lue's the coach, who I think has done a fantastic job in 2 years with the Clippers. I think he can work out with the Clippers. In fact, I think, and I've seen that they're like the 3rd betting favorite to win the title next year because people are assuming that Kawhi will be back And, he's almost like an Olympian. Every 4 years, you get to see Kawhi in the finals winning a championship. And then he disappears for, 3 or 4 years, and then he comes back. Maybe it has to do with the World Cup or, when there's a World Cup year, Kawhi wins the title. And we're coming up on a World Cup year. So the Clippers are like the third betting favorite, and they were essentially a 500 team last year. They didn't get through the play-in. So I think that John Wall will certainly help them.
Is he a guy that you see playing a big role in that team, or do you see him as more of a role player, bench guy, or do you feel like he's the third, the big in a potential big three?
I don't think he'd be part of the big three, but at this point in his career, he's been in the league 12 years, 13 years, gone through those injuries, got to the second round in the playoffs a few years ago when he was with Washington. He probably looks at it, this is an opportunity maybe to win a championship, so he'll accept his role. And, if he's a 24, 26 minutes per game type of guy who can do a multiple of things, because you could still run that offense through Paul George and Kawhi Leonard. They're both really good passers and good facilitators as well as being elite scorers. So I think the three of them will work well together. I don't see him being like an all-star caliber player, but certainly a high-level role player. Let's call him that. Yeah.
So last time we saw him, he averaged just over 20 points a game, 7 assists. So that was, the last time, again, like a year and a half ago. I don't expect him to average anywhere near 20 points a game on that team. I think that a reasonable expectation is 13 to 15, maybe a little bit higher. They don't need him to, unless, players are hurt. But I think that it's tough, Sap, as somebody who relied so much on being a scorer, he's never been like considered a great facilitator. I think, his assist numbers are actually pretty damn good, Sap. He's averaged 9 a game in his career. He's had a couple of years where he averaged over 10, but I think most people think of him as, a scoring guard. So he's going to have to figure out, after not having played for a while and also being a guy who's asked to score 20 points a game, to be a primary facilitator for that team. So I'd have to go back and watch, were his assists in his early days a product of him being, feared because he drive to the basket and then could kick out? Or is he genuinely have good court vision? I don't know. I haven't watched enough of him in a while to be able to make that determination, but I'm assuming that's what the Clippers want him to be.
Yeah, I mean, he had an elite scorer in Bradley Beal with him in Washington. Now he's got two guys that can certainly light it up in Paul George and Kawhi Leonard. So I think he's gone to the right place. I thought he might go to the Lakers, but if Westbrook's there, why would you have Westbrook and John Wall there? Some similarities there, older guards that are uber athletic who don't have their athleticism anymore. And again, I think Wall is a guy who will fit in better than say what Russell Westbrook did.
I think, in a way, Sep, if Wall fits in really well and the Clippers, have a great season or win a championship, if you're a Lakers fan, you would be, beating your head against the wall and saying, why couldn't Westbrook just do these things that we're seeing John Wall do, if that's, if it ends up working, because they do have a similar skill set. And I think that for it to work with the Lakers, all it would really require is just a tweak for Westbrook to play a different type of game that I think he's capable of doing, but just refuses to do.
Exactly. Yeah, it's being self-aware. And Westbrook's not very self-aware. We don't know as much about John Wall. He played in Washington, and then his career got derailed with the injuries, and he kind of was forgotten about, where Westbrook has a massive brand. Yeah, he won an MVP, averaged a triple-double for 4 out of 5 years. He's got the great big personality. And Wall has a great personality, too. But we don't know as much about Wall in terms of that personality. So I think he's more apt to fit in more than Westbrook. Yeah, Westbrook, if he was more self-aware, could say, well, I've got LeBron James. I know he's going to have to handle the ball quite a bit. I've got Anthony Davis. Like, this should work. We thought what Russell Westbrook was going to do last year was fill in the gaps when LeBron rested or Anthony Davis was injured and win you some regular season games so that you'd be a higher seed. Well, they didn't even make the play-in tournament.
Right. Yeah. So we'll see how it affects the Clippers. The Clippers are obviously, it's going to be a matter of health. And with Paul George and Kawhi and now John Wall, if you're betting on their health, you're betting on a long shot, because those guys all have a history of injuries. So we'll see what goes on with the Clippers. Sap, other free agent news was the Suns offer, the qualifying offer to DeAndre Ayton, making him a restricted free agent. So that gives them the right to match any sort of contract. A lot of people expect him to go. I imagine this is just a procedural move for the Suns to, if somebody lowballs DeAndre Ayton and he takes it, to match that and sort of have him on a great contract. But I think what's going to end up happening is that a team is either going to clear cap space, or a team like the Pistons, who already has cap space, is just going to sign him to close to a max contract, and the Suns will just say, go on your merry way.
Yeah, it seems to have fallen apart there with he and Monty Williams, which is unfortunate because I think Ayton's been a nice player for them. Not a great player. I mean, he was the starting center and played pretty well in the finals against Milwaukee last year, although he didn't really step up because Giannis dominated and Ayton wasn't really able to push back against him. He's a good player. But he was the number one pick in 2018, and that's the Luka draft. So, Phoenix can probably kick itself for not taking Luka with the first pick. Look, any team that didn't take Luka in that draft is kicking themselves, and other teams are kicking themselves for not taking Trae Young, who I believe went fifth in that draft, right? Luka went third, and Trae Young went fifth. So those are the two best players out of the 2018 draft. It was Sacramento that passed up on Luka as well.
And Sacramento took Marvin Bagley.
Sacramento has a way of passing up future Hall of Famers. They're really good at that. But I think that if Ayton goes to Detroit, they could be an interesting team because I thought they had a good draft night. And, they're making some nice moves as well. But, it just appears that Ayton's gone in Phoenix, and we'll see what Phoenix does going forward because this is a team that won 64 games last year, looked like the title favorites, and then lose in the second round against Dallas. And if they lose Ayton, they're going to have to address that loss, obviously.
Yeah, and Chris Paul's not getting any younger, obviously. So that's, it seems like they're a team that's primed to take a step back. We thought they were going to take a step back this year. We were wrong in the regular season, but I guess right in the postseason. Ayton, I think, is a good player, and I think he has the potential to still get better. He's very young, and I think Detroit would be a really good fit for him, though Detroit did draft a center. So maybe they are not as interested as was led to believe. Hawks are another team that have been talked about as being interested in DeAndre Ayton. He'd be an interesting fit there with Trae Young, who's a fantastic facilitator. So I think DeAndre Ayton's still got plenty of room left to be a really good basketball player. That 2018 draft, we're going to have to do a show on it, Sap, because it's really interesting in that, you look at some names of guys that are really talented, and have had some success, like Colin Sexton, and now DeAndre Ayton, and they're going to get moved in this offseason. It seems like Sexton's not going to be long for the Cavs. Ayton is obviously not long for the Suns, as we just alluded to. Other guys who have been traded in that draft, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander was traded on draft night. Wendell Carter has already been traded in that draft class. Marvin Bagley was the second pick, has already been traded. So this draft class has been a lot of volatility, except for Luka and Trae Young, who are obviously franchise players, and Jaren Jackson Jr., who had a nice postseason for the Grizzlies.
It's so difficult too because you're drafting players when they're 19 or 20. You're not getting finished products. I mean, there was a time where you looked at the first 5 or 6 picks, and it would be Olajuwon, who played 3 years of college basketball. Sam Bowie played 4 years of college basketball. Michael Jordan played 3 years of basketball. So you kind of had an idea where those guys were when they were drafted. Now it's one and done, or it's people, players from Europe, or guys are going to the G League. Heck, there was a player that never played at Kentucky that went into another league to play. So you don't know. So you have to see exactly what it's risky at this point. So after 3 or 4 years, you make the determination that we're going to have to move on from this player because we don't really think we can pay him what the contract is worth or what the level of his performance is worth, so we'll move on. It's very, very difficult. That's why you look at the Celtics. They had the third pick in 2016, the third pick in 2017. They nailed both of them. Give Danny Ainge credit for that, getting Jaylen Brown in 2016 and Jason Tatum in 2017. He nailed those picks because I make a case that certainly Tatum is the best player in the 2017 draft. I can make a case that Jaylen Brown's the best player in the 2016 draft.
Yeah. You got it. When you're picking that high, there's very little margin for error. You got to hit it or it sets your team back. Look at the Kings. They botched it. And so they are where they are right now. I'm sure they'd be in a lot better shape had they had Luka Doncic on their team. I don't know how happy Luka would be playing in Sacramento, but that's another story. So lots of NBA, free agency stuff is still tons of dominoes to fall as it starts on Thursday. The last piece of news, Sap, I wanted to get into, and we're gonna, be doing shows all summer long talking about this past draft, talking about, different players. I do want to talk about if Kyrie's a Hall of Famer, but we could do that at any point in time. An interesting hire in the head coaching vacancy for the Utah Jazz, Sap, as they hire Boston Celtics assistant coach Will Hardy, who becomes the youngest coach in the history of the NBA, I believe, Sap. He is 34, which is a year older than me, which makes me feel like, what the hell have I been doing with my life?
Talking to me, which is, I guess,
clearly
a pretty good thing. Yeah, I mean, that's not a bad thing. I don't think we get as much money as being head coach of the Utah Jazz. Yeah, 34 years old. He was hired last year. And people are immediately going to say, well, here's Danny Ainge cherry picking the Celtics organization. But Ainge was already gone when
he
Will
knows
Hardy
nothing
was
about
hired.
him.
He knows nothing about him because he was already gone. And they hired Ime Udoka, who hired Will Hardy. He's all part of the Popovich tree. And they must have been impressed with him. And again, when you get to the finals, everyone in the league is looking at not just the players, but the coaches, and they're impressed with the coaching staff, and whatever Will Hardy's role was on the coaching staff obviously impressed Danny Ainge. So he's going into a situation in Utah, which is a pretty good organization. You got Danny Ainge there. You've got Dwayne Wade there as a part owner, but now you're going to have to deal with, what's going to happen with Donovan Mitchell, Rudy Gobert. Are they blowing it up? Are they going to try to trade those pieces off for draft picks? Because we know Ainge loves doing things like that. So it may be not the easiest job to go to because we don't know what situation the Utah Jazz are in right now.
Right. The Jazz it's a tough organization in that you have basically an impossible place to recruit free agents to. But the benefit of it is it's a very stable organization. You have a relatively new owner who's very wealthy. You have two pieces in there already that whether you trade them or whatever, you're going to have some form of talent on the team, whether it's in the form of established players or young guys that you get that should be talented, pieces to develop. And maybe with such a young head coach, that perhaps that's the best option for the Jazz is to sort of blow it up and let the young players they get in return for Rudy Gobert or Donovan Mitchell grow with the young head coach. I think that's sort of what the Celtics tried to do with Brad Stevens, and it worked for a while until it didn't work anymore. With them getting all these young players for Brad Stevens because he was very young when he took over the head coaching job as well. Also, if you're the head coach of the Jazz, you do get a little bit of runway because they are a stable organization and because it's Utah, and you don't want to be constantly, shuffling the deck chairs. Jerry Sloan obviously was there forever, coached 1,800 games for them. Ty Corbin wasn't there for that long, but they still gave him 258 games to coach. And Quinn Snyder coached 636, and they would have gladly kept him had he not stepped down. So they're not a team that's gonna just, if we have one bad season, fire you, which I think is something that you want as a head coach to say, okay, I want some time, especially for first time head coach, right, to learn on the job, because it's not going to all go perfectly from the get go. So if I'm Will Hardy, it's certainly a good place to land, I think.
Yeah, and he got a 5-year contract, which is good. If it doesn't work out, then maybe he goes back to being an assistant coach and then gets another chance to be a head coach. But I know he's pretty well thought of, and especially at that age to get that job is very, very impressive. But that's a pretty stable organization. Again, as you said, a rich owner. Even they're always kind of there. They never quite break through, but they're always, the 4 or the 5 seed. Heck, a couple of years ago, they were the 1 seed, and they fell short. They always seem to fall short, but they have big decisions to make. More pointedly, Danny Ainge has big decisions to make when it comes to Gobert and Donovan Mitchell. They may move on from both or at least one of them and see what they can get back in return and go from there.
Yeah, and I think, for the Jazz, being that they're a small market team, they have the ability to sort of sell something to their fan base. If they blow it up, sell something to their fan base and saying, listen, we're building something for the future. So they got a loyal established fan base. They're the only team in town. It's not New York or Boston where, you need to win right away. So it gives the front office and it gives the head coach a longer runway. But they do have big decisions to make. We know that Gobert and Donovan Mitchell don't get along well. And we know that pairing isn't going to lead to a championship. So I'd expect it to be a very fascinating offseason for the Jazz. And this is just the start of it.
Yeah, without question. it's a really difficult time for them to figure out what they're going to do with their two top players. And we know Ainge will make moves until later when he won't make moves when it's the trade deadline and the team needs some help, and he won't make a move at the trade deadline because he can't live with losing a trade, but losing a trade that may help in the long run. I mean, that was kind of his weakness as an executive, but he's well respected out there. He's one of their favorite sons because he played at BYU. He's kind of a legend in Utah. Yeah. So, they'll give him some extra time to build something there with the Jazz.
I think the most logical trade, and I heard this one talked about for a little bit, Sap, is if they were going to swap Gobert for Ben Simmons. I feel like that would work for both teams.
I could see that. Yeah. Now you got Gobert with Durant and Kyrie. You've got the rim protector, more of a defensive guy. I think he's overrated as a defensive player, but, work with me on that. And Simmons goes out to Utah where there's no pressure. I mean, right. Simmons went from Philadelphia to New York. And I know Brooklyn's not the Knicks, but heck, if you're playing with Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant, there's pressure because, it's a very viable and visible franchise. That might be a perfect place for Ben Simmons to go to Utah, where it's kind of a laid back atmosphere, although their fans can be a little bit nutty, but more so against the opposition than their own home team.
Right. Just an initial salvo in terms of our trade speculation, Sap, for this offseason. And again, we're going to have a ton of shows this offseason reacting to everything. We'll be back later this week. We're going to have some good guests lined up this offseason too. So we'll make sure to tease all of that. And Sap, I know that you're going to be writing plenty of columns this offseason too. Hopefully they don't get interrupted by craziness again.
Yeah, no, I got to call him up on, LeBron potentially being the owner of a Las Vegas expansion team and how we put together this dream team. And again, it was just pure fantasy because the first player he selected would be Michael Jordan, which again, Michael Jordan playing for LeBron James would make Skip Bayless's head explode. But, I had some fun with that. And also writing a column, which will be posted soon, on the potential of Boston hosting All-Star Weekend. The last time Boston hosted the All-Star Game was 1964, 3 weeks before the Beatles made their U.S. debut on the Ed Sullivan Show. That's how long ago it happened.
It was a good All-Star game. It was really a quality game. Everybody remembers it
All-Star
very
game.
Well.
Yes, exactly. Sure, Bill Russell won.
Yeah,
I
probably.
just figure he won, and he won everything. So why wouldn't he win that?
Right. So make sure you're checking out our social medias all summer long. At John Sapp 25, at Jet Stryer. Again, we're going to have really good guests lined up too this offseason and talking about everything that happens. And we'll get some draft reaction next too. We needed to talk about this Kyrie stuff because he is my favorite punching bag. That's going to do it for us here at the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sapp. Thank you to Full Press Coverage. And we will be back later this week with a new edition of the podcast with NBA free agency about to start. Exciting times. We'll talk to everybody later. See ya.